It took less than 2 minutes. I didn't do it for attention. There were no cameras, no one clapped, no one even slowed down. It was raining, hard. I was heading to the bus stop after school when I saw her, an old lady, stuck at the corner, gripping 2 grocery bags and trying to time the traffic light with a cane and a soaked trench coat. She looked scared. Everyone else just walked past her. I didn't. I walked up, took 1 bag from her, and said, "Let me help you." She smiled, just barely, called me gentle, said no one stops anymore. I walked her across. She thanked me. I said it was nothing. 3 days later, a man in a suit knocked on my door, said he was her attorney, and what he handed me changed everything I thought I knew about being seen. My name's Jaden. I'm 17, and for most of my life I've been the kid adults whisper about in hallways. Watch out for that one. Troublemaker. Too much attitude, not enough discipline. I got labeled early, mostly for things that had more to do with what I didn't have than who I was. No dad around. Mom working 2 jobs. I moved schools twice in 1 year, and by the time I got to high school, I already had a reputation I didn't earn. I wasn't a bad kid. I was just angry, tired, over it. Teachers expected the worst, so I gave them what they expected. I stopped raising my hand. I stopped trying. But I always noticed things. The kid eating alone at lunch, the janitor who stayed late every day, the way people looked through each other like they weren't there. That day, the day it all changed, started like any other. I'd stayed late at school to finish a makeup assignment in the library, since my laptop at home was busted and I couldn't afford to fall behind again. I barely passed last semester. By the time I left, the clouds were already rolling in. I knew I'd get caught in the rain, but the bus was only 5 blocks away, and I didn't have money for anything else. As I turned the corner onto Jefferson Avenue, I saw her, an older woman, maybe late 80s, standing at the edge of the sidewalk, one hand holding a cane, the other gripping 2 plastic grocery bags that looked way too heavy for her. She wasn't just waiting, she looked stuck, like she'd misjudged the light, like the cars flying past made her nervous, like she was 1 false step away from something bad. I slowed down. There were plenty of people around, adults even, but no one stopped. They walked around her, rushed past her. A few glanced and kept going, probably thought someone else would help. I didn't think about it. I didn't plan to be a hero. I just saw someone who needed help and did what my mom would have hoped someone would do for her. I walked up, tilted my hood back so she could see my face, and said, "Hey, you want help crossing?" She looked up, eyes pale and watery, and let out a breath like she hadn't spoken in hours. "That would be lovely, sweetheart." We crossed together, slow and steady. I carried 1 bag and stayed at her pace. She made a little joke about her knees being older than the sidewalk, and I smiled. At the other side, she squeezed my arm gently and said, "You've got a kind soul. People don't stop anymore." I told her it was no big deal, and I meant it. I didn't ask for her name. She didn't ask for mine. I just waved and jogged off into the rain, headed toward the bus stop with my sneakers soaked and my hoodie dripping. I didn't expect to think about it again, but 3 days later, she found me. It was the kind of rain that seeps into your socks, cold, relentless, soaks through every thread before you even realize how wet you are. I'd just finished that late library session and was heading toward the bus stop when I saw her, at the corner of Jefferson and 5th, where the light takes forever and the crosswalk signal doesn't always work right. She stood just off the curb, shoulders hunched, plastic bags swinging slightly with the wind, her cane planted but unsteady. She looked left, then right, then back again, like she was trying to summon courage to move but couldn't time it right. A few people walked past. One guy muttered "crazy old lady" under his breath. No one stopped. I hesitated for a second, not because I didn't want to help, but because I knew what I looked like. Hood up, backpack slung low, soaking wet, and probably scowling without meaning to. I'd had people cross the street to avoid me before. What if I scared her? But she turned to look at me, and in her eyes there wasn't fear. There was exhaustion, frustration, a quiet kind of pleading no one else seemed to notice. That's when I stepped forward. "You okay, ma'am?" I asked, voice lower than usual. She blinked at me through foggy glasses. "Just trying to get across, dear. These lights never work right." I offered a hand. "Let's get you there." She nodded. I took one of her bags, stayed close. We stepped off the curb together, and I kept my eyes on the cars, daring them to try and rush through the yellow light. I walked slow, matching her pace, her cane tapping along the pavement in rhythm with her breath. Halfway across, she chuckled. "Haven't had a gentleman escort me across the street in 40 years. I smiled. "Guess I'm old-fashioned." When we reached the other side, she rested for a second before speaking. "You've got a gentle way, you know. That's rare. People don't slow down anymore." "Thanks," I said, a little awkward. She patted my arm like a grandmother would. "The world's loud, but the kind ones stand out." Then she looked down at the wet street and whispered like to herself, "You're the first person who's really seen me in weeks." That hit me harder than I expected. I told her to get home safe. She said something about her cat waiting for dinner. And then I jogged toward the bus, not thinking much of it. Just glad she made it home okay. I never expected to see her again. But she didn't forget me. 3 days later, someone knocked on our door. And the man standing there? He wasn't from school. He wasn't from a store. He was from her. It was Sunday afternoon. Mom was folding laundry. I was half asleep on the couch, earbuds in, scrolling through the same 3 apps on my phone. Then came the knock. Not rushed, not aggressive, just deliberate. Mom opened the door and I heard her pause. "Can I help you?" A man's voice answered, deep, even, like someone who gives bad news for a living. "I'm looking for Jaden Thomas. I'm here on behalf of Margaret Langley." My head shot up. Margaret Langley? I walked to the door, still wiping sleep from my eyes. The man was in his 50s, gray suit, leather folder under one arm, rain-dotted glasses. Something about him made the air feel colder. He looked at me like he already knew everything and wasn't here to ask questions. "You're Jaden." I nodded. "I represent Mrs. Langley's estate. She passed away last night in her sleep, peacefully." My mouth went dry. I barely knew her, didn't even know her name. But hearing that, knowing she was gone, hit harder than I expected. "Before she passed," he continued, "she requested I deliver something personally to you. Said it couldn't be mailed, that it had to be handed over with respect." He handed me the folder. "She called you the boy with the umbrella soul." I frowned. "What does that mean?" He smiled faintly. "You shielded someone when no one else would. That's how she described it." I sat on the porch step, folder in hand, heart racing like I was holding something too big for my chest. Inside were 3 things: a handwritten letter, a legal document, a sealed envelope labeled "For his mother, when he's ready." I opened the letter first. The handwriting was shaky but elegant. "Dear Jaden, you don't know me, not really, but you saw me when no one else did. You helped me without asking. without judging, without needing anything in return. That's rare. I've taught students for 40 years, funded scholarships, mentored dozens, but your kindness on that rainy Tuesday told me more about character than any GPA ever could. I have no children, no living family, but I've always believed in planting seeds where they might grow. Please consider this a small acknowledgement of what you gave me that day: dignity, humanity, and warmth. I looked up, breath caught. The legal document? It was real. A scholarship fund. In my name. $25,000. Designated for college, trade school, or whatever future I chose to build. No catch, no press, just possibility. I couldn't speak. Neither could my mom when I handed her the other envelope. She read the letter silently, then hugged me in a way she hadn't since I was little, like she saw me again for the first time. That night, I sat on the porch, watching the sky, thinking about Margaret Langley and how someone can pass through your life in 120 seconds and still change it forever, all because of a crosswalk and a choice. The next morning I met with the attorney again, this time at a small law office tucked between a dentist's office and a florist downtown. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a solemn smile. She was a remarkable woman, he said, as he led me into a quiet room with 2 chairs and a stack of paperwork already prepared. And she was sure about what she wanted. He slid a binder across the table, but he didn't make me read it. Instead, he opened it to a single page, highlighted in yellow, signed in blue ink. In the event of my passing, I designate $25,000 to be released into a scholarship fund, held in trust under the name Jaden Thomas, not based on grades, not based on test scores, based on instinct, character, and what I witnessed with my own 2 eyes. I looked up, stunned. She did all this just from me helping her cross the street? The attorney nodded. It wasn't just that. She told me something before she passed. She said, that boy treated me like I still mattered, like I was visible. And when someone feels seen, really seen, in a world that constantly rushes past them, sometimes that's all the difference. The fund was real. The money was real. And so was the belief she had in me, a kid nobody ever expected much from. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a burden, or a screw-up, or a walking detention slip. I felt like someone with a future, not a second chance, a first one. I kept thinking about her letter, that line, I've always believed in planting seeds where they might grow. Margaret didn't need applause or credit. She didn't need to live forever to make something last. She just needed someone to believe in. And that someone, somehow, was me. By the time I walked out of that office, I knew 2 things for sure. I was going to college. I would never again let anyone tell me I wasn't worth the effort. I didn't touch the scholarship money right away. I let it sit there for a few weeks, like a secret only I knew. Not just money, but proof that I wasn't who they said I was. That someone out there, someone who had only known me for 2 minutes, had seen through the noise, past the hoodie, beyond the labels, and believed in me. I ended up enrolling in a local community college that fall. I studied psychology. Ironic, maybe, for a kid people thought needed fixing. But I wanted to understand why people give up, why people stop noticing each other, and how someone like Margaret, in her final days, could be the only person who ever really looked at me. I kept her letter in my wallet for months. Every time I wanted to quit, I read it. Plant seeds where they might grow. In my second semester, I started volunteering at a senior center. Once a week at first, then twice. I helped with reading groups, deliveries, even the tech class where I taught them how to unmute themselves on Zoom. One afternoon, I walked one of the residents, Mr. Lopez, to the corner. His knees were shot, and he was nervous about the light. Halfway across the street, he chuckled and said, "You remind me of someone." I just smiled. "Good people," he added, "walk slow with the ones who can't hurry anymore." A few years later, I started a mentorship group for kids like me, ones who don't test well, who get labeled too early, who walk through life with their heads down, because the world already made up its mind about them. We call it the Crosswalk Project, not because we're saving people, but because we're helping them cross something they don't want to walk alone. And every year, on the anniversary of the day I met her, I write a new scholarship in Margaret Langley's name. Just one student, quietly chosen, someone kind when no one's watching, because that's how she found me. And now, I'm passing it forward. You never know who's watching. Not in the viral video, social media kind of way, but in the way that matters. Sometimes, the smallest choice, 2 minutes in the rain, is enough to change your whole story. Because kindness doesn't need permission, or reward, or credit. It just needs someone to stop and say, "Let me help you across."